Hi, I've been rattling off at this camera and it's been off. Okay, hi. Let's talk about the rise in fascism. And at the same time, let's do my makeup. So basically, I was saying that as we've been looking around at all of the current events, it's really easy to question how did we end up here, especially when everything that's happening has happened before. And not only has it happened before, we've pledged that it will not happen again. So, in everything from the Trump presidency and the disastrous rise of COVID and the deaths of like so much of the American population, to the situation in Israel and Gaza, and how literally after the fascism of World War II, the violence, the world global war of World War II, World War I, we all sat down and said this will not happen again. And yet, seemingly in tandem, all at the same time, we're watching the ultra-right, far-right, ultra-nationalist movements succeed and be proliferated in the United States and across Europe and throughout all of the West. It seems that far-right forces are rising. My whole thesis is that this is not a coincidence. My name is Deanna. I'm a senior at Brown University. I attend the Watson Institute of International Affairs, and I feel it's very important to connect the dots. So much of what's happening throughout history and in our current events are because of governments purposefully keeping people ignorant and patterns being repeated without any indication of their signs or any preventative measures. So today I'm hoping that we can all sit down and just talk. I know a lot of the times things like this can seem really daunting or difficult to follow, so simultaneously I'm at least going to attempt to do my makeup. So let's talk first about definitions. So what exactly are we talking about today? And throughout the rest of this video, I'm going to do my best attempt at plain English. So what is fascism? What is far right? What's far left? Is there an up? Is there a down? Um, what is ultranationalism? And why does it matter? Because I'm sure the thing we're worried about most is like, okay, yeah. All of that political talk is cool, but my uncle just got grabbed off the street, or my best friend just got forcibly disappeared. I'm terrified. Or it could be I'm not affected by any of that. And as a matter of fact, I want them to be getting disappeared. That's not what's bothering me. What's bothering me is that the government promised me one thing and I feel betrayed. So yeah, let's sort of break that down. So far right basically means that you've kind of looped back around. So when you're right-wing conservative, I'm going to speak in terms of American politics, and there is some overlap, but it's different throughout every country, but this is just a good sort of general guide. Right-wing essentially means you believe that government influence, as in like full national government influence, should be limited, and the extreme powers should remain within local communities. Basically, this ensures that like it's meant to prevent dictatorships. And through accomplishing that, it makes sure that the power ideally remains in the hands of the people who are most affected. So, for example, underneath a communist regime, which would be a far left type of politics, the federal government, i.e., like the government in charge of the whole country, would be making decisions for the whole country. So in countries like America that are huge, it means one representative, or a group of representatives who might not all have experience in specific regions and might not have the best contacts with specific regions, are making decisions for those cities, for those neighborhoods that not only they might have never even stepped foot in, but they don't really know the specific struggles and needs of those communities. So that's why you'll see a lot of conservatives in America advocating for states' rights above all else in issues like abortion, and advocating for things to remain in US hands, US industry, and what we call the free market, which is basically the idea, oops, I dropped my lip gloss, that the federal government shouldn't be in charge of regulating super closely all of these industries and businesses. Basically, free market is the idea that businesses will regulate themselves, and it's an overstep of government power for people to like insert themselves in hyper monitoring or owning certain industries. And so there's a little bit of validity to this. However, one of the vices of a far right situation is that it sort of can end up sacrificing the care for people for the protection of the powerful's freedom. So what I mean by that is, like, it enables things in situations where, let's say, there are like 4 fish companies, but one of them belongs to the son of a millionaire, and the other 3 are just mom and pop, very small local industries. Since there's no regulation, the ones by the son of a millionaire, he already has enough money to buy all 3. So let's say maybe he buys 2 and there's only 1 company that doesn't bend. That millionaire now has control over 3 companies, 3 industries, and essentially 3 different identities, because those who buy it will associate the names of those industries with who they believe to be in charge of it. So essentially, you have them tricking people because they'll be buying from mom and pop shop, but in reality, it's owned by Mr. Moneybags, or whatever the hell you want to call him. That guy from Monopoly. So that's basically the dangers of a free market. Without regulation, it's really easy for one individual or one conglomerate, which is a group of companies, to take advantage of the entire situation. And so the other end of the spectrum is the left, which believes that the government is responsible, heavily responsible, for caring for the people, and therefore a lot of services that the government would be in charge, that the government should be in charge of the vast majority of social services. So that looks like government involvement in school lunches, in public schools, in SNAP, like food payments, all this kind of stuff. Ooh, I look pale as a ghost. It's really hard to do your makeup while talking about politics. So if this is looking a little ghastly until the end, just bear with me, okay? Yeah, so that's basically the left. You have democratic socialists somewhere in the middle where they're like, yeah, the market should be free range, free market, free whatever. But the government still has that important responsibility to look out for the least fortunate. And they believe that those with the most money should be taxed the most so that their surplus can go towards people who can't eat. Whereas on the right, there's this belief in trickle-down economics, which is the idea that as long as the businesses are making the most money and being taxed the least, they're going to hire the most people since they have enough money to do so while still receiving a massive personal check. And yeah, somehow they convince, if you can't tell, I'm a socialist, somehow they convince the working class that that's a good idea, when in reality it just leads to like abuse of workers' rights, etc., etc. But anyway, ultra left is when you get like dictatorships, where since it's only one guy in power and he's in charge of the distribution of wealth throughout the entire nation, he hoards it and like puts a lot into the military and into consolidating as much power for himself as he can possibly achieve. And so this isn't good because it leads to like people starving while the one guy in charge of the government bribes and convinces and makes other officials fear for their job positions, life, salaries, etc. With too much power in his hands, he's able to manipulate the entire elections process, etc., etc. So ideally, there's this happy medium where people are able to enter whatever industry they want, but there's still that government safety net of insured social services. Yeah. So, with that in mind, let's start talking about my theory of how fascism, which is far-right ideology, that basically the country should fend for itself, borders should be closed, citizens should be put first, which all of this sounds good, spoken aloud, because it is sort of right-wing, whatever. But when you get far right into authoritarianism and fascism, it means that all of these ideals are taken to the extreme. So you start hearing things like no one should be let in, and that all immigrants are bad, criminals, evil, should be exposed, whatever. You start hearing things like being a citizen of this country means that you have a certain type of blood, that there's like a good German blood or a good American blood, red-blooded American, like that there starts to be an almost biological and inherent quality into being a citizen of a nation rather than it being tied to a piece of paper in a document or where you live. And so then that gets into issues of race, and it leads to profiling people where even if they truly do have all their papers in order and are a citizen, because they look a certain way, you start to believe they don't have national blood. That's fascism, racism, what led to World War II. So let's get into it. What led to World War II? Because a lot of people start to say where we are right now in American and global history is looking a lot like World War II. This is actually the period with the most wars happening simultaneously since World War II. And again, after World War II, he said, we are never doing this foolishness again because everybody's dead. Everybody's children and babies are coming out deformed because we've been gassing and poisoning them. So this is bad. We agree this will never happen again. After World War II, we established the United Nations to make sure this will never happen again, to come up with some type of human rights. So what's happening now that we can be so numb to the deaths of tens of thousands of people daily? So let's get into it. World War II happened because of World War I. World War I happened because of complicated foreign relations that led to like one guy got assassinated over in Austria. And so whoever was allied with Austria had to jump in, and then whoever was allied against whoever jumped in had to jump in, yada, 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 until the US ended up getting involved. And now it's Axis versus Allied, all of this stuff. World War I is the world's first experience of like trench warfare and like horrific, traumatizing types of weapons being used. It changes the global perception on war forever. It goes from this valiant act of heroicism to a canon event, essentially, for young men. So after World War I, you know, the Axis powers are defeated, and Germany gets blamed very heavily for the war taking place. Now, because of this almost overbearing responsibility and weight on an already impoverished Germany, because they spent all their money on war. War is expensive and war is profitable. It depends on which side you're on. Because of this, Germans start to grow deeply resentful and question why them. They feel like they're being put down on a global sphere. They're starving, first of all. And if you've been hangry, imagine prolonged hunger. And they start to come up with false things in their mind. They start doubting who can be trusted, and they start pinning it all on the religious minority, the Jews. They come up in their mind, they invent this idea that the Jewish people have it better, that they're wealthier, whatever. When in reality, a central part of the Jewish religion is community, a communal support. So perhaps if in an alternate reality we had all put more of our money and efforts into uplifting each other, rather than allowing our dire situations to tear us apart, World War II might not have happened. Hitler might not have been able to take power. It could have gone an extremely different way. Instead, envy grows, Jews are targeted, and this is where a fascist leader is able to rise. When a country, after a devastating period of war, is extremely hungry, is dissatisfied with its current direction, people are suffering, and so they want a strong, almost parental, like fatherly government figure. And this leads to what we call a cult of personality, Hitler and his parallel, Trump. Hitler is able to gain momentum and followers because of the way he speaks, the strength behind his words. People believe that he's being open and honest. People are easily swayed. Academics hate him. Other politicians hate him, except for the ones who see him as an opportunity to social climb. But for some reason, to the average Joe, he is extremely appealing because he seems to understand and be rightfully angry about the decay of their nation. He assigns almost like a new social group. He says that being of German nationality is something that you can feel in your blood, that calls to you throughout your ancestral line, that resides within you. And because of this type of blood, you have an inherent right to a certain type of existence. And that's what people needed to hear, so they vote him in. And as their neighbors start getting disappeared, they believe they deserve it because they're here illegally or because they committed some crime or, whatever. So queer individuals start to get targeted, yada, yada. But that's essentially what fascism is. So my key point that I want to make in this video is that fascism and far-right movements are able to rise after periods of extreme international duress. In our case, COVID. It also has to do with how long it has been since the last fascist, far-right, authoritarian, whatever regime. So, for example, countries like Spain, as far as I last checked, which was last year, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, people from Spain, hola. Ciao. Siento. Anyway, Spain was able to resist the lull of a fascist leader in their most recent elections because they had just undergone fascism and they had just experienced what it's actually like to be under a fascist leader. Because he says it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows, and you agree until you're the one being targeted, and then all of a sudden nobody wants fascism anymore. So, you're sort of lulled in with the promise that it's not going to be you, it's going to be them, they're the problem. But then suddenly you're the problem because you dare to have an opinion or be a businessman, or, you're realizing that you're not who he was there for, he being the leader you elected. He lied to you. He was there for money, wealth, power, and to enact his own personal agenda involving whatever other global superpowers he desired to bring in. See, I told you I was going to get this together. Look a little better. It still look a little bit ashy, but mind your business. So once you sort of get to that point, it's someone yearns for a leader like that only when the situation is dire and whatever government they had before is seemingly fully and completely unable to help. So the situation in America had been sort of plateauing for a while. You know, we'd had Obama twice. People who hated black people were like, how can we have this dude in power? Like, there's no way. This is crazy. And, you know, people just kind of generally forget. So after, you know, the lull and dissatisfaction grows with our Democratic leader, this new guy comes on the scene who's well known, well loved, a television personality. And some people vote as a joke, some people vote for real because he's speaking their language. He's saying what they've been told is inappropriate to say, and they vote him in. COVID hits. Trump handles it terribly. Biden handles it, but slowly and poorly, throwing the throwing the U.S. into economic decline, just sort of as a necessary repercussion of a global pandemic. And so after Biden, people are feeling dissatisfied. People are still broke. The economy is still terrible. And Trump comes on the scene again and gets elected because the people are dissatisfied after such a period of extreme and worldwide death. People have lost family members. People are growing conspiracy theories. People don't trust anyone except for this almost paternal figure who comes in extremely confidently and tells them that he's going to look out for them, that he hears them, that he knows things that the others aren't telling them. So basically preying on what's already a complete lack of trust, and search for answers. Additionally, people get extremely religious after losing everyone they love. People either become atheistic or more religious. And in America's case, I would argue that the vast majority of the population became more religious. We sort of, as a community, embraced this idea of Christianity as the religion of America and as whatever is going to save us. People compare Trump to Jesus. People compare Trump to this like king who's going to save us and help us. So my argument is that because of the repercussions of COVID, led to a rise in global discontent and feelings of betrayal, of fear, of confusion, which eventually led people to elect who they believed was telling them the truth, who enabled them in what they believed was a righteous hatred, righteous indignation. They didn't want somebody who would play nice. They want someone who they feel would fight for them. Unfortunately, that's never the intention of a fascist leader. They're fighting for themselves. And with the rise of one extreme fascist, hateful leader, the rest of the world under similar situations followed. And, you know, it's happening in Britain. It's happening all around the world. I have a lot of people asking me, like, why is Netanyahu getting away with this? It's because, like, Israel as an entity is the same as America. America came into existence through the slaughter of indigenous peoples and the utilization of slave labor and all of these kinds of things. Like, it's the same blueprint. And so by fighting for and, you know, in their eyes, hopefully winning the fight for Israel's quote-unquote right to exist, but specifically right to exist in its current form as an ethno-nationalist state where some parts of the population are prioritized over others, based off of skin tone, with checkpoints and extreme militant supervision and all of these kinds of things where people live in fear, children are able to be murdered and viewed as inferior. The world does not respond, the world doesn't care. I mean, the world cares in the sense that some things are being written, but similar to slavery in the US, it's not stopped. The whole point is to utilize the labor of ethnic minorities to make as much money as possible, take as much land as possible, and by take, that necessitates moving someone else off of it. So I believe if Israel is able to succeed in this, or alternatively, if Israel is stopped and a one-state solution and peace are accomplished, all of this kind of thing, then the US will have to follow suit, and Canada will have to follow suit, and all of this kinds of stuff. Like, they're going to have to pay repercussions. Hopefully China will finally have to free their Uyghurs. All of this. How many times can Didi say all of this in one conversation? But yes, I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say. The survival of these colonial entities is intertwined. One necessitates the other. They cannot survive independent of each other. And so, against the will of their people who are being actively tricked by a chauvinistic politician, because it's happening in Israel too. It's happening all around the world. This pull and switch to ultra-conservative male leaders who seek to limit women's rights, queer rights, i.e. the rights of anyone who can betray the idea of a monotonous, sort of one-type-fits-all idea of nationality. So as we finish with my makeup, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for listening. I have interviews with a few human rights experts in international human rights bodies coming out soon. You should follow me on the TikTok. I'm wearing my lip gloss. And let me know if you liked this video format. I think it's very important for us to continue to educate each other and to fight for the free spread of information. So, without further ado, let me put on some blush. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can literally reach out to me via my email, my website, my TikTok comments. I regularly go through and answer those. My YouTube comments, YouTube shorts. I'm pretty available despite all odds. So yeah, thank you for learning and doing my makeup with me. Bye.